Welcome to the Deep Dives. Today, we are undertaking what I think is a really critical mission to fundamentally re-examine one of the most celebrated and frankly foundational conflicts in Western literature, the Trojan War. We're going to be intentionally shifting our focus away from the noise of the bronze-clad heroes, the celebrated men of glory like Achilles and Odysseus,
Right.
to the women who endured, suffered, betrayed, and ultimately survived.
And that shift in perspective is really the entire essence of our source material today, which is Natalie Haynes' extraordinary work, A Thousand Ships. For centuries, the epic tradition has privileged the rage, the honor, the death of men.
Always.
But this dive is all about analyzing the true, sweeping, and often hidden cost of that decade-long conflict, viewed entirely through the eyes of the women, the enslaved, the victims, the silent witnesses, and in some cases, the eventual cunning avengers.
And what we have here, it's not a straightforward narrative timeline at all. This deep dive is structured more like a kaleidoscope of grief and endurance.
That's a great way to put it.
We're pulling together all these different vignettes, angry monologues, and some deeply skeptical letters home. We're charting the emotional landscape of the war from its mythical inception all the way to its catastrophic aftermath and the very troubled returns. We'll be listening to the voice of Calliope, who is the muse of epic poetry herself, and she kind of frames the whole story for us.
Right, she's our narrator, in a way.
Exactly. Alongside mortals like the doomed Princess Creusa, the furiously vengeful Queen Hecabe, the patiently plotting Clytemnestra, and of course, the perpetually skeptical Penelope. This isn't a history lesson, it's more like an autopsy of devastation.
To really grasp the magnitude of the human suffering that we're about to explore, we have to start not with Helen, but with the divine calculation that made the whole war necessary in the first place.
Right. This conflict wasn't just a reaction to a runaway wife.
Not at all. It was an act of calculated divine engineering.
That concept, divine engineering, it fundamentally alters how you view the war's themes, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So let's unpack this. The ultimate thematic setup. It begins with Gaia, Mother Earth, who is just literally overwhelmed.
Yeah, the sources describe her as suffering under the unbearable weight of an ever-increasing mankind. The imagery is just so powerful. Gaia, the Great Mother, is portrayed as sort of stretching her aching limbs, causing the very earth to move faintly beneath the weight of humanity.
Wow.
Her complaint to Zeus is basically an environmental and demographic crisis. There are simply too many mortals, and they're too heavy. They are consuming everything, denuding the forests, emptying the seas, overplowing the fields until the soil just can't give up anymore.
So the divine order, as Zeus sees it, required a brutal and immediate correction.
Exactly. So Zeus, who is the ultimate authority and, let's be honest, chief pragmatist, consults Themis. She's the goddess of divine law and order, the sort of moral structure of the cosmos.
And what's so fascinating is the sheer coldness of their planning session. It's chilling.
It's a bureaucracy of death. I mean, they weigh their options for population control and then just reject them one by one. Plague.
Too inexact. It might hit one region too hard and leave another untouched.
Right. Floods are too indiscriminate because they could wipe out the livestock that Zeus needs for his sacrifices.
Of course. Can't lose the sacrifices.
And then localized disasters like volcanoes or earthquakes, they're ruled out because the death toll is just too low.
Yeah.
And they're susceptible to Poseidon's partiality.
So the solution is formalized. A massive, self-sustaining conflict. Zeus realizes that this existing tension east against west provides the most efficient, the most calculated way to just exterminate thousands of lives at once.
And just like that, the Trojan War, when you view it from Olympus, it ceases to be about honor or justice. It was a solution to a logistical problem. This thematic underpinning is so crucial for you to get. The human epic, all those years of suffering, the deaths of countless heroes, it was merely the execution of a divine policy decision.
Which, of course, brings us to the famous catalyst that ignites this whole planned catastrophe, the judgment of Paris.
Yeah.
And it begins at the wedding of the sea nymph Thetis and the mortal Peleus.
And like in all good tragedies, strife has to make an appearance. Eris, the goddess of strife, she wasn't invited to the wedding feast.
Big mistake.
Huge. Her act of revenge is to throw a golden apple inscribed with the words, "Take a list," for the most beautiful. And this single act triggers this colossal ego-driven quarrel between the three most powerful goddesses, Hera, Athene, and Aphrodite.
And Zeus, very understandably, wants nothing to do with judging his wife and two of his most powerful daughters. That's a political nightmare even for him.
Oh, absolutely.
So he delegates the fatal decision to a mortal. Paris, a goat herd who is secretly the son of King Priam. The moment he takes up that judge's role, The fate of Troy is completely sealed.
And the bribes offered by the three goddesses. I mean, this really reveals the transactional nature of power and beauty and war. Hera, the queen, she offers political power and dominion over all of Asia.
Not a bad offer.
Athene offers military wisdom and defensive warfare skill, the ability to be undefeated. But Paris, guided by lust and vanity, he chooses Aphrodite's promise, the most beautiful mortal woman, Helen. His personal desire just immediately subordinates all the strategic interests offered by the other goddesses.
And it's so important to stress that this wasn't just a choice affecting Paris and Helen. This one choice, born of human vanity, it provided the necessary human motivation for the gods to launch their population control plan. Thousands of people would now become the cannon fodder for Gaia's rest.
And before that fleet of 1,000 ships can even set sail, the price begins to be paid. And not in gold or plunder, but in horrific grief and monumental betrayal. We see two really sharp examples of this pre-war cost: the tragedy of Iphigenia and the devastating, almost unbelievable devotion of Laodamia.
Iphigenia's story is the source of all the familial poison for the victors, isn't it? It's the ultimate betrayal by her father, Agamemnon, the high commander of the Greek forces. He needed wind to sail the fleet from Aulis, and the goddess Artemis demanded his daughter's life as a sacrifice.
And the calculated cruelty of his lie is almost unbearable to read. He lured Iphigenia, his own child, to Aulis under the pretense that she was going to marry Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior.
She must have been thrilled.
Oh, the sources elaborate on it. She was incredibly excited. She packed her finest saffron-colored gown. She wore makeup, had her maidservant carefully arrange her intricate plates, all preparing to be the spectacular, honored bride. She saw glory in her future.
But glory was replaced by blood. She knelt silently before Agamemnon, who held the knife, and the text says tears were streaming into his beard. But Clytemnestra, her mother, was forced to witness this whole ordeal, this false marriage that just culminated in murder.
And she screamed so violently in protest that she had to be physically restrained by 5 men. The single traumatic event, watching her daughter's life exchanged for wind, is the original violation. And it just poisons Clytemnestra for the next 20 years, setting her on this dedicated path of revenge.
If Iphigenia's tragedy is the root of the victor's domestic destruction, then Laodamia's story is this profound exploration of despair and the psychological toll of foreknowledge. Her husband, Protesilaus, was destined to be the first Greek warrior to die when stepping onto Trojan soil.
A fate Laodamia had foreseen and desperately tried to prevent.
But the destiny was unavoidable. Protesilaus, determined to prove his courage, was the first man ashore and was immediately killed by Hector. And Laodamia was left consumed by a sorrow so profound, the sources say, that the citizens in her town actively avoided her. They just couldn't bear the sight of her grief.
And this overwhelming sorrow leads to this extraordinary act of devotion that really characterizes her story. A local blacksmith who had previously lost his own wife to grief felt deep compassion for her.
The same guy who was selling weapons to the Greeks.
The very same. A man who'd made a decent living from the war. He used a huge chunk of bronze to sculpt a perfect life-size statue of Protesilaus, a simulacrum.
And it's not just a statue, is it? It's described as being warm to the touch, a perfect physical substitute for her husband.
Exactly. Laodamia refuses to let it out of her sight. She eats with it, drinks with it, sleeps with this bronze replica, treating it exactly as she treated her dead husband.
Which must have been terrifying for her parents.
It was. They were genuinely worried for her sanity, so they remove the statue while she sleeps and place it on a funeral pyre, hoping that the finality of the ashes will allow her to finally process her grief.
But her devotion is just too deep.
Way too deep. She wakes, sees the pyre, and hurls herself onto the flames. This dramatic act catches the attention of the gods, who, in this rare display of pity, send Hermes to Hades.
And she's granted one last day with Protesilaus.
One last day. She feels his warm hand on her back, telling her not to cry, reinforcing this illusion of their life together. But the moment he's returned to the dead, the reality shatters her completely.
She realizes she can't live with the memory of what she had just briefly regained.
So she ties her own bed sheets into a noose and follows him to the afterlife, achieving a tragic, but notably a chosen death. She took control of her end.
These two accounts, Iphigenia's betrayal and Laodamia's devotion, they show us so clearly that the true cost of this war was already being extracted, long before a single decisive battle had even been won.
As the war rages on the Scamandrian plains for a decade, the sources shift their focus from the, glorious feats of men to the grim politics of human commodities. And these Surprising moments where traditional definitions of heroism are just completely challenged.
Let's look first at Penthesilea, the Amazon queen. She arrives late in the war as an ally to the weary Trojans, but her motivation isn't political or economic at all.
No, she's an inversion of the typical warrior seeking glory. Her motivation is pure atonement, which is such a powerful theme. She accidentally killed her sister, Hippolyta, during a training exercise.
And the sources are specific about how it happened, right?
Very specific.
Hmm.
Hippolyta failed to catch an arrow that Penthesilea had shot high into the air. In a moment of recklessness, Penthesilea had lost her own reflection. For her, the only penance fitting for such a crime was to die a warrior's death in honorable combat.
And she is highly selective about her opponent. She views the Trojans, even though they're her allies, as a ragtag gang, not worthy of ending her life.
She seeks Achilles, the greatest and fastest warrior alive, because she knows he is the only one skilled enough to deliver the dignified, decisive end she craves.
The character analysis here is so striking. The duel itself is described as shatteringly brief.
It is. Achilles, moving with inhuman speed, runs his sword through her neck. But the critical moment is Achilles' reaction immediately afterward. Instead of that typical triumphal rage, he is filled with this profound wrench of shame and regret.
He realizes he's killed a woman who is essentially his mirror image, a warrior defined by speed, skill, and this fierce dedication to her own code.
Yeah, and this shame is unlike anything he felt for his other anonymous kills. He is so disturbed that when a Greek soldier behind him laughs at the fallen Amazon, Achilles immediately turns and stabs the Greek soldier. This scene really redefines Achilles' character. The poet suggests that Achilles only ever truly cared for Patroclus, his companion. But now, standing over Penthesilea, he sees a second person who might have matched his intensity, maybe someone who could have filled the void left by Patroclus' death.
So the savage killer recognizes a piece of his own humanity reflected in the face of his dying enemy.
Exactly. And this recognition of humanity brings us to the grim reality that drives the central conflict of the Iliad, the politics of prizes. We have to discuss Briseis and Chryseis, who are not really characters in the traditional sense, but economic and political commodities whose ownership drove the fate of nations.
Briseis was a princess of Lyrnessus, a city Achilles conquered. And the source specifies that he slaughtered her entire family, husband, father, brothers, mother, as effortlessly as drawing breath.
Just devastating. She's taken as a prize, and we see her immediate dependence on Achilles' companion Patroclus, who treated her with this consistent kindness that contrasted so sharply with Achilles' murderous arrogance.
And then there's Chryseis, the daughter of Apollo's priest, Chryses. She was captured and taken by Agamemnon. The sources suggest a layer of spite in Agamemnon's choice. He chose her because she was younger, wanting the superior prize, regardless of fairness.
And this is what sparks the conflict that defines the whole epic. Chryses, the priest, comes to the Greek camp demanding his daughter's return. When Agamemnon, fueled by shallow pride and monstrous vanity, refuses...
Apollo sends a plague on the Greeks.
Exactly. And this is a technical detail that's vital. The gods intervene not because of the women's suffering, but because a priest was disrespected.
Right. It's about protocol, not morality.
Agamemnon is eventually forced by his own men to concede, seeing his army decimated by the plague. He returns Chryseis. But, determined not to be seen as weak or prizeless, he throws a fit of petulance and spitefully demands Briseis from Achilles.
Which is more than personal. It's a challenge to the established spoil system and to Achilles' honor.
It triggers Achilles' famous withdrawal from battle, his sulking, which, as Calliope notes, lasts for 17 books.
What 1,000 Ships does so well is give Briseis a voice in that moment. For Achilles, this is a crisis of honor over property. For Briseis, this is a renewed crisis of survival. She is passed between the men, recognizing that her life is an asset to them and nothing more.
And we see her deep, genuine mourning for Patroclus, the one who showed her kindness.
And the final piece of character analysis here is just heartbreaking. When Achilles finally dies, Briseis does weep, but the narrative clarifies that she weeps for everyone but him.
Oh, that line.
This profound irony just underscores the whole section. The man who murdered her entire family and claimed her as a prize is mourned only because his death signals the potential end of the wider war and tragedy, not because she loved the so-called hero. Her endurance far outweighs his rage.
After 10 years of bloody stalemate, we move from the plains to the claustrophobic setting of the city walls. We experience the fall of Troy not as a grand military moment, but as this slow, agonizing descent into betrayal and fire.
And we experience this through the eyes of Creusa, Aeneas' wife. The setting itself provides such a sharp contrast. After a decade of siege, the Greeks appear to just sail away.
Right.
Carusa recounts this sudden rush of hope that flooded the city, allowing the gates to open for the first time in 10 years. People were laughing, touching the grass outside the walls, but she carried that crippling fear of waiting for him to return.
And the key event, of course, is the Trojan horse. They see this colossal, crudely built wooden structure 3 or 4 times the height of a man left as an apparent offering to Athene, the city's protectress. Creusa describes the ribbons of sacrificial status tied around its brow.
The debate among the Trojans is fierce and chaotic. Priam, already broken by the recent loss of Hector, he's struggling to manage his subjects. Men who had fought side by side were now snarling at each other. Burn it, save it, or drag it into the city.
And Creusa herself admits that she was mentally disconnected from the whole debate. She was just yearning for quiet, wishing the war and the men would disappear so she could sit peacefully with her son and husband on the dunes, regardless of who ruled.
The warning comes from Laocoon, the priest, who urges them to burn the cursed horse. He casts a spear into its flank. But then the drama just hinges on one character,
Okay.
the Greek spy, Sinon.
Sinon is masterful deception personified. He appears filthy, weeping, wearing only a loincloth but adorned with bright ribbons, the traditional signs of a sacrificial victim. He spins this intricate, believable lie.
That he was a Greek intended for sacrifice by Chalcis and Odysseus, and he escaped.
And here's the core of his manipulation. He claims the Greeks built the horse so large, specifically so the Trojans couldn't roll it into the city. He argues that if they defy this size limitation and bring the horse inside, they will steal its divine power, ensuring safety for Troy and robbing the Greeks of their safe voyage home.
It's brilliant, really. He's playing on their pride and their desperation.
And even sharp-witted Hecate frowns at the inconsistency of his tale. How could he know the plan if he was hiding in the reeds when they built it? But Priam, weakened by grief, is too vulnerable to resist the story of a fellow victim seeking sanctuary.
So when Laocoon is neutralized, the path is clear. They breach their own walls to drag the horse in.
And Creusa's fate is perhaps the most chillingly described consequence of this betrayal. She dies in the burning city, but the source uses this incredible detail to convey the intensity of the destruction. She realizes the birds outside are singing.
Why? Because the fires of Troy are so bright and intense that the birds believe it's morning.
Exactly. She notes she was dead long before dawn, consumed by the conflagration.
If Sinon was the external betrayal, the sources also reveal a devastating internal treachery. The actions of Theano, a Trojan woman driven mad by grief.
Theano, the wife of Antenor, is consumed by anger because Priam continuously refused to give up Paris or Helen, thereby prolonging the war. She has lost 4 sons to the conflict, obliterated by the folly of another woman's son, which is how she sees Paris.
So she convinces her aged husband, Antenor, to open the city gates from the inside, completing the betrayal.
And this action exposes a critical theme of moral inversion, something the muse Calliope later comments on. Antenor's despicable betrayal results in his wife, Theano, and his daughter, Crino, surviving and being free women, a vastly better fate than the destruction that met Priam's fiercely loyal family.
Loyalty was punished, treachery was rewarded.
Right. And finally, the 10-year arc of Paris's self-serving vanity comes to a fitting end, delivered by the woman he first abandoned, Oenone, the mountain nymph, and his first wife.
Oenone's character analysis is just built on bitter recollection. She recalls their idyllic life before Helen, but also his abandonment of her and their son the moment he learned Helen existed.
So when he, mortally wounded by a Greek arrow, crawls back to her, knowing her unique gifts of medicine and prophecy could save him, she is long past forgiving.
When she sees him, she smells his odor of death, realizing how pathetic and frail the man who caused a decade of carnage truly is. This is her moment of pure agency.
It really is. She chooses revenge. She refuses to heal him because he thought only of himself, even when begging for his life. She chooses justice over mercy, demanding he leave her mountain so his death won't pollute her sacred space.
And he dies alone, unmourned by the person who knew him best. That refusal is so powerful because it highlights a different kind of strength than what we see on the battlefield. It's the strength to resist the appeal of misplaced sentimentality and choose self-respect, even if it means watching an old love die.
With Troy reduced to smoking ruins, the systematic destruction of the vanquished begins. And this section really centers on the crushing consequences faced by Queen Hecate and her surviving children, revealing the true, comprehensive price paid by the royal house.
And Hecate is just surrounded by grief, often focused on her daughter Cassandra. Cassandra, the tragic priestess of Apollo, is one of the most poignant characters. She can see the future as clearly as a recent memory, but she's cursed never to be believed.
The curse is a form of psychological torture. Her constant weeping, screaming, and muttering lead her own family to slap her and ignore her prophecies. The dread of what she saw, like the body of her son Polydorus washing ashore, was just relentless.
So the family had to convince themselves she was mad just to survive their daily lives.
Pretty much. And Polydorus's death is particularly cold-blooded. Priam and Hecate had secretly sent their youngest son to an old friend, Polymestor, in Thrace, along with 4 gold circlets to ensure his safety and future.
And Cassandra correctly predicted his death, but was, of course, ignored.
His body washes up on the shores of Troy, beaten before he was killed. It becomes clear Polymestor murdered the boy for the 4 gold circlets. And Odysseus, ever the strategist, confronts Hecate, asking if she has any other living sons, knowing they would pose a threat later.
But there's this strange moment of compassion there, isn't there?
There is. Odysseus offers a momentary flicker of it, agreeing to help Hecate bury Polydorus, recognizing her deep pain, and even admitting he would have done the same to protect his own son, Telemachus.
But Hecate's grief has now hardened into cold, methodical fury. The victim is transforming into the avenger.
Absolutely. Odysseus informs her he's taking her to Thrace as his prize. And Hecate realizes this geography offers her final opportunity for justice. She secretly plots revenge, luring the greedy Polymestor and his sons onto the ship with promises of the secret Trojan treasure she claims to have smuggled out.
What follows is this visceral communal act of vengeance.
It is. Hecate and the other captive women slaughter Polymestor's boys, and then, using short, womanish knives, they blind Polymestor by plunging the blades into his eyes. This is crucial character transformation.
Hecate, having lost everything, tells the ruined king, "I have been dead since I buried Polydorus. It makes no difference where I fall."
She has transcended her status as a victim and become pure elemental justice.
But this horror immediately precedes an even greater one, the fate of Andromache, Hector's widow, who was taken as a prize by Achilles' son Neoptolemus.
The most heartbreaking casualty of the aftermath is Astyanax, Hector's young son. The Greek herald, Talthybius, is sent to execute him. And the reason is stated with chilling clarity. Hector was too great a warrior, and his son must not be allowed to grow up to seek vengeance or rebuild Troy.
It's a political execution, designed to ensure the total destruction of the dynasty.
Yeah. And Andromache's plea to the herald is designed to just tear your heart out. She falls to her knees, not asking for her son's life, knowing that's impossible, but begging for the mercy of killing him herself.
To smother him in her arms.
Right, to prevent him from suffering the fall onto the rocks below.
And Talthybius coldly refuses.
He does.
Yeah.
The child, the last true symbol of Troy's future, will die where he was born, thrown from the walls. This moment just summarizes the cruelty of the victors. Systematically separating women from any remaining family member, compounding the psychological torment of slavery with the memory of their child's horrific death.
Yet, amidst this forced destruction, there is one final act of self-determination, the sacrifice of Polysena, Priam and Hecate's daughter.
Polysena is chosen by Neoptolemus as a gift to my father, Achilles, to be sacrificed on his tomb, a custom ensuring the dead hero receives a final prize.
But Polysena, witnessing the fates of her sister-in-law and her brother, sees this as a perverse opportunity for agency.
She does. She realizes that death is preferable to slavery, which she fears more than anything, especially the prospect of serving Helen or becoming an insignificant part of a conqueror's household. She walks willingly to the altar, refusing to weep, offering her throat to the knife.
By accepting this fate with utter courage, she achieves a noble, self-determined death. She chooses honor over the prolonged degradation faced by her mother and Andromache.
And as the Trojan women are divided up and the ships prepare to sail, Cassandra's vision is finally realized. She is claimed by Agamemnon, knowing precisely what awaits her. She will return to Mycena, only to be slaughtered alongside him by his wife, Clytemnestra.
The source notes that for Cassandra, the dread is finally over. The disaster is no longer a future threat, but an imminent reality she can embrace with a strange sense of calm.
The war on the plains is over, but the consequences just boomerang back to Greece, plunging the so-called victors into their own cycle of domestic tragedy and endless, frustrating wandering. The theme here is that the trauma follows the survivors home.
And the first and most dramatic homecoming is Agamemnon's, leading directly to his murder. Clytemnestra, having waited 20 years since her daughter Iphigenia's sacrifice, has meticulously plotted her revenge alongside Aegisthus, Agamemnon's cousin and her lover.
And this isn't a crime of passion, it's a cold, calculated operation. Clytemnestra masterfully exploits Agamemnon's arrogance and his hubris. She lays out these purple, crimson-dyed tapestries, a potent symbol of the blood of his enemies and an offering usually reserved only for gods for him to walk upon.
He initially hesitates, right? He recognizes the sacrilege.
He does, but his arrogance wins. He removes his boots and walks across them barefoot, comparing himself implicitly to a god or a supreme conqueror. And that act of hubris, stepping on the purple cloth, it seals his doom.
The thematic connection is so clear. He returns a victor abroad, but the sins he committed to secure that victory now devour him at home.
The murder scene is described in shocking detail, highlighting Clytemnestra's determination. She traps him in the bath in a robe with stitched sleeves, paralyzing his arms so he can't fight back.
And she uses a short, womanish sword, not the grand bronze sword of a hero, to stab him multiple times. He screams, and his viscera spills onto that magnificent, symbolically stained purple cloth.
The revenge is fulfilled, but the immediate consequence is the activation of the next cycle of violence. Electra, locked away during the murder, hears the screams and begins pounding on the door. The Furies, those ancient, terrifying goddesses of vengeance who pursue blood spilled by kinsmen, immediately find Electra, compelling her to avenge her father.
So it just sets up the next generation of familial bloodshed with Orestes, ensuring the victorious house of Atreus is just as utterly destroyed as the vanquished house of Priam.
The source material then pivots to the legendary hero Odysseus, whose 10-year struggle to return home is viewed through the critical and skeptical eyes of his wife, Penelope, in a series of letters.
And Penelope's letters provide a crucial character analysis of Odysseus and really the whole genre of epic poetry itself.
Oh, absolutely. She critiques the unreliable bards who sing of his adventures. The Cyclops, Circe, the Laestrygonians, Calypso. She finds the stories fantastic and absurd, specifically questioning the logic of a hero who constantly boasts of his cunning, yet falls into such obvious, easily avoidable traps.
She details the story of the Cyclops, where Odysseus told the giant his name was No One. The irony is perfect.
It is.
Yeah.
Because Odysseus, in a fit of ego and boastful pride after escaping, reveals his true identity to the giant, Polyphemus. And that invites the specific curse of his father, Poseidon, which condemns him to 10 more years of wandering.
Penelope notes that his famous cleverness was ultimately his greatest downfall.
Meanwhile, the war at home is being waged by the suitors. Young men who missed the grand conflict but are now waging their own slow, destructive conflict on her household staff, her storerooms, and her son Telemachus.
So Penelope, a renowned weaving expert, has to constantly engage in this delaying tactic of weaving and unweaving the burial shroud for Laertes.
Right. And the sources provide a final, sentimental, yet devastating detail. The return is recognized only by Argos, the ancient dog.
Odysseus returns disguised as a beggar, fooling every human being in his household, even Penelope.
Only Argos, the loyal ancient dog, recognizes his master's unique scent, manages to wag his tail once in exhausted satisfaction, and then dies.
It's such a gut punch.
And Penelope's final complaint in her letters summarizes the true, enduring costs of the war on domestic life. Odysseus kept his return a secret, even from her and Telemachus, for several days, valuing caution, strategy, and the successful outcome of his final battle over his wife's comfort or immediate relief.
The victory abroad brought neither peace nor immediate relief at home. It just brought more deceit.
To conclude this deep dive, we have to return to the perspective of the muse of epic poetry, Calliope, who frames the entire story. She delivers the ultimate thematic judgment on the war and completely redefines what it means to be a hero.
Calliope's role is meta-commentary on the entire genre, isn't it? She chastises the traditional male poet, who demands she sing only of male glory, for being blinded by the spectacle of battle and mistaking the truly epic for mere tragedy.
Her central argument is simple yet revolutionary. The deaths and suffering of men are celebrated as epic, but the deaths and suffering of women are routinely dismissed as mere tragedy, as unfortunate footnotes to the real story.
She insists that epic is countless tragedies woven together, and that challenges the fundamental definition of heroism that has dominated these narratives for centuries.
Yeah, if the story of the war is only the 10 years of fighting, it's a tragedy. If the story is the 20 years of waiting, the betrayal, the sacrifice, the rebuilding, and the vengeance, then it becomes epic endurance.
She asks a truly provocative question designed to make us question our assumptions. Is Menelaus, the man who lost his wife, stirred up a massive army and created countless widows and slaves, more heroic than Oeni, who merely lost her husband and quietly raised their son in the mountains, choosing dignity over forgiveness.
The answer the source material compels is clear. Heroism resides not just in the spectacle of battle and the moment of death, but in the quiet, enduring act of survival, nurture, and the choice of self-determination. The true character analysis is done on those who persist.
The lasting thematic insight, therefore, is that the true cost of this conflict was systemic and absolute. The victors were ultimately destroyed as completely as the vanquished. The men returned home, if they returned at all, having sacrificed what they didn't realize they had, their humanity, their peace, their domesticity, and their family's health, in order to uphold their destructive masculine notion of glory.
And looking through the eyes of Creusa, Andromache, and Hecate forces us to realize that the epic narrative of the Trojan War, as it's traditionally told, requires thousands of individual devastating tragedies to exist. The story we've unpacked today is fundamentally the story of those who paid the real, sweeping, and lifelong price, ensuring that victory meant nothing.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive into the perspectives of 1,000 ships. We've revealed that to truly understand the Trojan War, you must look beyond the battlefield and count the casualties. Not just the men who fell, but the identities and futures of the women who survived, were betrayed, and ultimately found their own savage forms of vengeance and endurance.
So our final provocative thought for you to consider. If Calliope is correct, that heroism resides in all of us, particularly when circumstances push us to our limits, what contemporary stories or narratives, particularly those centered around conflict, are we collectively dismissing as mere tragedy when they are, in fact, epic endurance? What untold silent suffering must be centered in modern accounts of conflict to reveal their true complexity, moving beyond the traditional male gaze of glory?
An excellent challenge.
Yes.
Continue exploring perspectives that challenge the traditional narrative. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.